So welcome back, everybody. We are almost on time still. To bottle or not to bottle is the question for the next hour. I would like to introduce the participants in the next panel. I start next to me, Rafael del Rey. He's the general manager of the Spanish Observatory of Wine Markets and general manager of the Foundation for the Wine Culture. He's also chairman of the Wine Tourism Committee at the Spanish Association of Wine Journalists and Writers, member of the working groups at the OeMv for Economics and Statistics, and member of various juries regarding wine tourism and writings on wine tourism. Muriel Chatel, coming from a family of winemakers in Bergerac. Muriel led the way for wine refill in the UK with her straight from the barrel concept at Borough Market in 2002. Over 18 years of experience and dedication to the concepts of refill, reuse, and reduce has taught her a few things about running a sustainably focused business. In 2019, Muriel decided to swing the spotlight onto wholesale and the need for more practical, sustainable solutions that fully embrace the circular economy in order to raise the bar for the trade and push sustainability standards that are both achievable and impactful. In November 2020, Sustainable Wine Solutions launched a bottle returns scheme through a partnership with Damien Barton of Langoa Barton. In December 2021, SWS were awarded a special commendation for Best Logistics and Supply Chain Green Initiative at the Drinks Business Green Awards. That was very much information, but you've done so many different things. And finally, Andrew Catchpole, who will be the moderator of the discussion afterwards. Andrew is currently editor of Harpers Wine and Spirit, the UK's leading publication for the drinks trade. Andrew has long experience in the world, having written across and edited both consumer and trade titles, while also hosting and moderating numerous events, including tastings and issue-led panel discussions. He most recently launched Harper's Sustainability Charter to provide a platform to encourage and drive sustainable progress in the drinks world. So we will first have a short presentation of Rafael, then of Muriel, and then the discussion will start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Just briefly to return to our title, to bottle or not to bottle, the question is where to bottle. With COP27 wrapping incredibly recently, everyone in this room is aware of the need for our wine industry to, and with some urgency, to play its part in reducing, lowering its carbon footprint and becoming ever more sustainable. As an industry, though, we're still addicted to 75 cl bottles, a legacy of glass blowers' lung capacity of old. And many of these bottles are still shipped far around the world, great distances around the world. We also have alternative packaging increasingly being pushed as a solution, but with both trade and consumer still very much plugged into the reassurance, charm, and convenience systems are set up for glass bottles of that packaging. So what we're going to do today, after Rafael's presentation, which will set the background, set the scene, is look at the part that glass bottles can play in the sustainable narrative and try and answer the question as to how they can hold their own. There'll be an opportunity for audience Q&A as well towards the end, so do please kind of join in and interact with the panel. But that's it for me for a moment. And Rafael, could we have your introductory presentation, please?
All right, thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you very much for the organization. Yes, as Andrew was just saying, I just wanted to give some numbers very fast and very briefly, just to give an idea of what the size of the bulk wine is, as usual. And particularly, my key point is, as I used to do in years before, is to show that when we talk about bulk wine, we're actually talking about very different things and different markets and different types of wines, right? Well, just very general information on what bulk wine is. It's around 1/3 of total wine trade in volume terms, and it's only 7% in total value. Of course, bottled wines are the most important wines. Yes, still, bottles are extremely important for the wine industry and wine consumption in general terms. Actually, both bottle and bulk wine have evolved pretty parallel, not that much on value terms, where bottled wines have evolved better. But if we start giving a look to who are the main actors, both as exporters and importers of bulk wine, then we start seeing some differences. When we talk about bulk in general, of course, we know that Spain, Italy, Chile, Australia are in volume terms the most, the top exporters of bulk wine, and Germany, UK, USA, France are the top importers of bulk wine. Although, and here's the point that I want to make. When we talk about prices at which, as an indicator, prices at which bulk wine is exported or imported, then we see that we start seeing that there are a lot of great differences, right? Price is just an indicator of what is being traded. We have, as we know, that bulk wine exported by New Zealand that has become one of the top exporters of bulk wine at more than 2.50 euros per liter. And that's a type of wine. Whereas, and probably will be very different from the bulk wine exported by Spain at around 0.4 euros per liter. We are talking about different wines, different things, different markets, acting differently, evolving differently, probably to different clients. So just to give those two big extremes, but we can also look at Italy, Chile, what Australia is doing, what the US is selling mostly to which countries? In the case of the US, as in the case of New Zealand, to the United Kingdom. United Kingdom is playing a very interesting role. I'm sure that Muriel will talk and Andrew will talk about that. It's becoming, of course, one of the key importers of bulk wine, but it's completely different from what France, for instance, or Italy, or even Germany is importing. And the reason why they are importing and what do they do with those wines that they are importing. We are talking about different worlds within the wine industry. We can size those two big segments of bulk wines, actually using both exported above average price and below average price, and we can give the size more or less of these two big groups, big segments of the market. Of course, Italy, Chile, Australia, the US, France, New Zealand, Argentina, and Portugal will be above average price among the exporters, while Spain, South Africa, Canada, each one moving wine to different markets for different reasons are below average price, which is set at around 0.7 or 72 euros per liter. We can do the same thing with importers. The UK, USA, China are above average prices, while Germany, France, Italy, producers to a large extent that import a lot of wine are below average prices. And these two big groups, above or below average bulk prices, are evolving differently, which is, and I'm sure we will talk about trends, and here is something that has to be mentioned when we talk specifically about trends, because when we talk about trends for the bulk trade, or bulk wine trade, we are talking about two completely different issues. Actually, my guess for the future is that the first segment of bulk of this bulk trade, which is the one above average prices, the one that goes to final consumers, the one that goes to the UK, to Germany to extent, to the US and to several other countries, will increase in the future because there is a type of consumption and a type of trade relationships that will make it increase, while the other segment of the bulk trade, which is the one among producers, will probably decrease in the future. So there are two completely different trends, and we have to segment these two big parts of the segment. We can see what has happened in recent years, both in volume and in value. And what we have seen is that, well, this bulk wine above average prices has been increased so far, while the other one has decreased. Just to conclude, bulk wine represents only 1/3 of total wine trading volume, although 7% in total value. It's evolving quite slowly. Trading bulk is very much concentrated on the side of exporters, although more extended and probably will be even more extended in the future among importers. Among exporters, those above average price account for 61.7% of total market, so it's the most important part of the market, although a lesser part of the volume. Among importers, markets with higher prices account for 51% of total value, although only 36.6% of total volume. Trade of wine in bulk is growing, particularly for the upper category of markets and particularly in value terms. Our focus today is, of course, in those higher value markets that import wine in bulk for local bottling and further distribution. I'm sure that we will understand much more about that with Muriel's presentation and the debate afterwards. And just one final remark, something that I learned this past week, I think it was. Accolade Wines has been bought very recently by Vidrala, the Spanish glass company. Actually, I do have very good relations with Vidrala, and I know them for a long time. What is Vidrala doing by buying Accolade Wines? Accolade Wines is one of the largest bottle companies. Maybe you know it better. And they are a very important part of why wines come in bulk into the UK market. Actually, probably not only to be distributed within the UK, but also to be re-exported. So, which is another part of the market that is very interesting. Remember, UK is, I think, is the 10th largest wine exporter in the world, and it's not because of its own production, right? So, just to give a hint, because it was very recent, what is Vidrala doing by buying Accolade? And actually, they do explain it. There are two key elements that in their press release they decided, because or to strengthen its supply chains and as a key part of its strategy on sustainability. Probably we'll talk about these two things. Well, that's it for my part. Thank you.
And I think absolutely right. It's that higher value bulk. It's coming in, being bottled in market, and the ways in which that's progressing in terms of image and penetration that we'll be looking at. So Muriel, would you like to tell us a little more about Sustainable Wine Solutions, which is, I think, quite a remarkable and very individual and unique, I think, a company in the UK. So over to you when you're ready. Yes, well, there are others, I'm sure, who will jump on the ship. But excellent.
Is it a PDF or it's a...
Yeah, it's a PDF.
Maybe you can just move it like this.
Perfect. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hi. So what I'm going to show you here is what we do in the UK. And it's basically another way. We are representing the bulk market from another perspective. We were not used to work to get wine producer we work with are not used to the bulk market. They were a bottle producer, and they did something for us that they had not done before. So basically, to resume, if we want to summarize what we do, it's no packaging, reusing kegs and bottles, plus regenerative viticulture, and that's Sustainable Wine Solution. So obviously, so that's what I was going to explaining. We work with a lot of organic, biodynamic, low intervention, natural wine producers. So basically what we are offering to them is an alternative between the bottle market, which is their own market, their own brand, and the traditional négociant market. So we are offering to buy in bulk. However, it's a different type of relationship than the one they would have with négociant. Our winemakers, so it was very important for us, and someone in the previous presentation about Cannes mentioned that as well. I think when you start doing things differently, it's very important to aim for the top, and we really wanted to show that you can import in small bulk keg in the UK and bottle in the UK and have really good quality wines. So this is why the relationship with Damien Barton was very important to us. So low waste import, because obviously everyone knows here that importing in bulk has less impact on the environment. Zero packaging, so that's when we are in the UK, we deliver nationwide, and we managed to deliver all our bottles without cardboard, without packaging. Everything is delivered in plastic crates. And the kegs have no packaging. So, yes. Zero waste delivery, yes. So that's to reduce transport emission. We use electric vans in London. But the most exciting part, and what's more relevant to what we are talking about today, is that making the bottle part of the solution has been really a revolution for us, because as Andrew mentioned, consumers are very attached to the glass bottles. They are not completely, alternative formats have a big impact and are taking a bigger part of the market, and that trend will continue. But for the near foreseeable future, the bottle is here to stay. So I think my concern was like, how can we make that glass bottle that everyone loves, how can we make it sustainable? So we are basically, so what we do, we import in bulk, we bottle in London, we've got a winemaker in London, and we reuse every bottle we collect. So that's, and we managed to use a lightweight bottle. So that's something that at the beginning everyone had told us was not possible, but we've been doing it for 2 years, and we are using 390-gram bottle. So that's, that talks for itself. So if you want to compare a standard bottle with a return bottle, you've got a saving of 68%. So what I call the return bottle, it's in fact, it's a traditional bottle that weighs 390 grams that we managed to include in a return strategy. And comparing 390 grams to 500 grams give you a benefit of 68%. Case study, so this is where it becomes really interesting. If you see that an average restaurant is going to go through about 350 bottles per week, you can see that if they go 100 liter on tap, 120 bottles in bottle return, 80 bottles, which would be the sparkling wine in traditional bottles, you've got a saving per year of 5 tons of glass, half a ton of cardboard. So that's a significant number, and that's only for one venue. So then, yes, it's true that eventually we can wonder whether the bottle is here to stay or not. But I believe, as I said before, the bottle is here to stay is going to be around for a very long time. But it's true that we shouldn't forget the benefit of alternative format. And like when you start using wine on tap, you've got a serious difference between wine on tap and other packaging like a traditional bottles. And so that's, that gives you an idea of, about what we do. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Muriel. So you think the bottle is here to stay for quite a while. Is there a suggestion that it is, however, a sort of in a transitional period, or do you think that in terms of the circular economy, we can secure glass's future for the wine business?
Well, I think the bottle is here to stay. The thing is, how can we make it more sustainable? And what we are proving actually, is that you can introduce a bottle within a reuse strategy. And it's a fantastic vessel. And once you include bottles in a reuse strategy, then you start wondering why would you want it to disappear? And so that's that thing. And I think in our lifetime, the bottle is not going to disappear. I mean, there are instances, it doesn't mean that I think wine on tap is going to take a bigger share of the market and bag in box, wine in can in retail, but the bottle is still going to be a main component of the offering.
Okay, thanks. I mean, another part of this is surely to look at the economic side and the economic sustainability of bottle usage. And I mentioned, and we've looked at the trends in terms of bulk shipments and so on. What are the actual benefits when you take it back to the producer and then all along the supply chain of bottling in markets? So removing some of that carbon footprint from the obviously the transportation of the bottle from A to B internationally. What are the benefits there?
Well, I think the thing, bottle reports deposit scheme were used before. I mean, in the past, people were using them. And the reason they stopped is not just because people wanted their own bottles and there was too many bottles. I think it was a very heavy process and very industrial process. And I think we are moving away from that. So the idea is not to go back to what it was in the past. I don't think it would make sense initially to send for bottle to travel internationally, although why not? But that's not exactly, I don't have the answer to that. However, there is an opportunity to work on small loop, to work within very local markets. That's more the local markets that are interesting, where when we buy the bottle we use, for example, if we have too many bottles, we can supply English wine producer or cider producers. We do not have necessarily to send them back to France or Europe.
Yeah, just to add, actually, bottling and destination has, I think, 2, maybe 3 big benefits. One, of course, is the environmental one. It's carbon print, it's lesser, and this is something that can be explained to the consumer, which is very, very interesting nowadays. The other one is purely economic. It's cost. But cost, consider it from the point of view of the difference between cost of transportations and cost of bottling. So depending on the distance, actually, it is very efficient from the economic point of view when you are shipping wines from faraway countries, like New Zealand to the UK, for instance, because the cost of transportation could compensate the difference in cost of bottling. And maybe it's not that efficient for Spanish wines sold to the UK in bulk, because the cost of bottling are much cheaper in Spain, and the distance is not very big. So the economic efficiency of bulk transportation will depend on the distance and the difference in cost in bottling. And then there is a third, I will say, benefit for bottling at destination, which is the commercial one. To what extent the people in charge of bottling at destination are those in charge of distributing the wine? I mean, who's in charge of distributing? Who's the responsible for the final distribution of the wine? There is a commercial benefit, especially in the entry-level segment.
And why is there not such a commercial benefit that's obvious at the more premium level?
Probably because people are, first because probably the consumer is different. At the premium level, the type of consumer and the type of producer are more willing to control the whole process of production until the final end, which is also including the bottling and the distribution of the wine. And this is good for both, for the producer and the consumer. The consumer wants to know where the wine has been bottled, where the wine has been produced, and probably would like to buy the bottle by itself. So yes, I think there are 2 key factors from the point of view of the knowledge about the markets that are important. One is the segmentation of consumption between entry level, let's say, and premium level, right? And bulk will work very differently for each of those segments. And the other one is the other point that is very interesting, which is that consumption is changing the world. Don't forget that up to the 1970s, 1980s, most of the consumption of wine in the world was within the producing countries. And this has changed completely, radically. Now, producing countries consume less and less wine, while consumption is increasing in non-producing countries. And the way that new consumers look at wine consumption is completely different. So they are much more open to new techniques, to new flavors, to new tastes, to new things, cans, bag-in-box, or whatever. So this is the other point. So it depends to whom we are selling the wine.
Well, this ties into one of the questions I was going to come to in a little while, but we may as well throw this in here now, because I wanted to ask about where resistance comes from in terms of bulk shipping and in-market bottling. And Muriel, maybe you could pick up as well. And this is especially the premium level. I think it's probably fair to say, and this is from a UK market perspective, that not too many people wandering into a multiple retailer and plucking a £5, a €5.50 bottle off the shelf are too concerned about the origin of the wine. But at a more premium level, we have in the supply chain, we have the producer, we have the importer, distributor, we have the retailer. And then we obviously have the end consumer. Is bulk even an issue as you move up the price scale? Do consumers recognize this? Could you comment on that? Because you're dealing with some fairly high-end, well, niche, more artisanal scale quite often, but really quality-driven establishments.
Yes, we are dealing with quality wines and low-intervention wines. The thing is that those wines can't be called niche anymore. I think they are about to take over the market. If you look at what's happening in Bordeaux, where everyone is struggling, the low-intervention wines and those, those vibrant new generation of producers are not struggling. But they are not selling Bordeaux. They are selling natural wines. They are selling low-intervention wines. They are saying so. I think even though we can say there is a premium and lower-end market, that's for sure. There is retail and there is on-trade and there is. I think what everyone is trying at the minute is to sell to the younger generation. And the younger generation, what they want is low-intervention wines. And they are more open to alternative format because sustainability is a real concern of them. And what we are showing is that a new supply chain is possible. It is possible to bottle and to keg quality wines at destination. And if you talk about the breaks, I would say for me the main breaks are the appellation system. And
I was going to talk about that.
Okay, and be nice to know what you have to say about it. But and as much as I understand why, it's the world is changing, and it's true that those something needs to be done. So maybe Rafael, you can help. Let's.
Well, I think it's a point that we should raise here because most of us live in Europe, and in Europe, the appellations of origin and all the legislation regarding appellations of origin is very, very important and has had a very deep impact in the trading of wine. Actually, many years ago, when I started in this industry, I remember we had the case between the legal case issue between Rioja and Deleuze, and I think that was forbidden. It was completely, Rioja wanted to be bulk wine forbidden to the last supermarkets, and they won it. And since then on, many other appellations decided that, and actually this was at the end, the final legal argument, in order to procure and in order to save and guarantee the quality of the wine, the whole process had to be done in the appellation of origin, in the territory of the appellation of origin. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if that's technically correct or not. But finally, legally, it was like this. And that was a sort of lessons to be learned by many others. Probably things are changing now. Probably there are new consumers. There are new places, new countries that look at wine differently, as we were mentioning before. But the legal point is still very, very important.
But I mean, it's fair to say, I mean, I've long now been a convert to bulk wine, but more specifically, the quality the technology that is in place to protect the quality with bulk wine, to the point where you can ship wine in bulk and you may well be likely to end up with a better, fresher, less oxidative, less heat-affected kind of produce going into the bottle, where it's being, if it's being bottled, for example, in Avonmouth or in the north of England or somewhere. So surely we don't, as a trade, have any lingering doubt as to the technical competence of, the part of the trade that's represented here.
I'm absolutely convinced. I'm not sure I should say this, but I think that from the technical point of view, we have all the means, all the tools that we need in order to guarantee that the final quality that is being in the wine that is put in the bottle will be perfect. Actually, I always thought that especially this legal issue had much more to do with economic reasons than to technical reasons. But don't remember, in many legal issues, particularly in Europe, and many legal issues regarding appellations of origin, the quality argument was the one that was used. But probably behind that quality argument, there was an economic argument. From the technical point of view, I completely agree. We can talk about flexi tanks. We can talk about, I was talking about accolade wines. They are perfect in bottling wines. They have no problem at all. The quality will be absolutely guaranteed. I don't think that will be an issue from the technical point of view.
Yeah. Well, there's one of the UK sort of senior figures that heads up the buying for one of our major supermarkets pointed out rather cheekily years ago when I was hosting a panel to do with bulk wine that all wine really begins life in bulk in one way, in a barrel or a tank, which I thought was quite a nice and provocative way of starting the discussion. So, okay, we've looked at the appellations, and the Rioja example is a good one. That is one stumbling block. There is potentially some consumer perception that bulk wine is not as good as, or in market bottling is as good. What about the wine trade itself? Is the wine trade itself? Because I do remember, I'm old enough, lived through the entire screw cap debate, which was sort of, the biggest innovation that happened in the wine trade in about 50 years, and it took about 20 years to sort of overcome the hurdles. And anecdotally, my social group, non-wine trade people, were simply kind of, yeah, cool. If the wine's in a better, in a better quality state when it arrives to me, I'm quite happy with that. There seemed to be very little resistance from consumers. So, how much does the wine trade itself sort of prevent a greater adoption and promotion of in market bottling for more premium wines specifically?
Well, I think the wine trade, let's say in the UK, the wine importers are all quite tuned to what's going on in that market. And you have more and more people who are trying to join that phase. Because let's say, what are the motivation? If the motivation are sustainability, there is no one that anyway, that I know in the wine trade or even in that audience that would say that sustainability should not be taken into account. So if you start thinking that sustainability is one of your highest motivation of consumers, then you cannot ignore that as a solution. My motivation is sustainability. But it doesn't mean that we are willing to pay more. We are not willing to pay more at all, actually, because what you realize that when you have a sustainable supply chain, everything is more organized, less chaotic, and eventually there is less, it costs less. And what doesn't cost less and what costs more is an entry-level wine, because in a sustainable supply chain, it's a given that you have to pay your supplier at least more than what it costs them to produce the wines. And I think in a traditional negociant market, that's not happening. And I don't know how many suicides we need in Bordeaux for the world to realize that it's a real problem. So no, wine merchants around me are in favor of finding solution and saying, but of course, it's more, some producers are more reluctant. But even so then it's kind of like it's going to take a while to get to onboard everybody, because people need solution. They are not reluctant because they don't want to do it. They are reluctant because they don't know how to do it. So that's did I answer your question?
Yes, no, thank you. Rafael, do you want to add?
Yes, just one thing. One of the things that I normally remember is that when I talk, I'm not an expert on this side, but when I talk to the trade in general, they always remind me that they are closer to the consumer than normally producers are. So they are really very good at testing what the consumer wants, right? And actually they have a very easy system, because they try things, they try new fashions or whatever, also regarding the closures or regarding the size of the bottles or whatever, and they can taste it very easily and see if they work or if they don't work. And again, it will very much depend on the country. It will very much depend on the market. Let's another example. We were talking about cans right before, and how cans, particularly for instance in Canada and in the US, are working very well. But we could also talk and remember what happened with bag-in-box in Norway or Sweden. From the point of view of the producer, it could not be a very good way to put the wine in, but from their point of view, it's perfect. So the trade will understand that. Sustainability will be an argument, of course, but yes, well, the other thing that they realize is exactly what you have just said. So being sustainable doesn't mean, or being willing to foster sustainability in wine doesn't really mean being ready to pay more for those wines, right? So the economic effectiveness, the economic efficiency of the train chain is also another very good argument.
But don't you think that if there is no way to keep having very cheap wines, those wines should disappear? That people should drink less, and maybe they only drink at weekend, I don't know, but at least they pay the right amount. And then if there are too many producers, then maybe they could start growing other crops. I don't know.
No, I think, well, wine, thanks good, will not disappear, and there are many other drinkers driven by many issues in order to drink wine. But price will be one of those, and that's why we talk about segments of consumption. And of course, yeah, sustainability will be one of the key drivers for future consumption. But there is something that I'm concerned of, which is the relationship between sustainability and price. And this relationship is something that
yeah, again, sustainable wines are not more expensive. It's only the very cheap wines that are less expensive than what they should be.
But I say it from the point of view of the consumer. And the point is that, well, for some producers, being sustainable is a little bit more expensive. And actually, the problem, we have done some research on this, for instance, in Spain, and I've worked with some German colleagues to do a research in the whole Europe, and it's a little bit more expensive to produce. And what they find is that consumers do not really are ready to pay more for it. But again, they can be convinced.
And then this is why a new supply chain is interesting, because if you save on packaging, then the saving on packaging compensates and largely the increase in production cost.
Definitely.
And especially if you compare a traditional and organic, for example, I mean, it's only the first years that are kind of more expensive, I think. Yeah. I mean, I'm being the devil advocate. I just, yeah.
No, please do. And I think, sorry, just lost the point. I was going to make something Rafael was saying a little bit earlier. It'll come back to me, don't worry. I think perhaps if let's focus in really closely now on glass itself. I mean, I think I only know the figures for the UK market, but I think only around half of glass is actually recycled. So there's a long way to go there. And I'm thinking about the overall carbon footprint of glass here, so just full stop. There's also been quite a lot of talk about the need for standardization of bottles, which might be really useful around the whole of, at least starting with, say, Europe. But Muriel, I think you've got a pilot scheme there, which is, could you just describe more about what you're doing in terms of taking a complete medley of different glasses, and then using those, putting wine you've imported into them, basically reuse as opposed to recycling, which is surely a much better way, and kind of helps to close a particular sort of gap in terms of sustainability at the end of the supply chain?
So basically what we started doing is collecting all glass from our customers. So if customers buy about 20% of their drinks from us, we will collect all their wine bottles, whether we sell them to them or not. So that's a pilot, and I've got a very supportive team, because now we've got a warehouse full of glass bottles. And we are first trying to establish the size of the beast, so how many different types of bottles there is, how much they weigh, etc., etc. And what we want to do is to use bottles that already exist. So we start from the premises that all bottles should be reused, that there should not be a concept of a reusable bottle. So if bottles are not reusable, it should say on the bottle. But the premise is that if it's a bottle, it shouldn't be for single use, it can be reused. And also what we want to show is that you can do reusable scheme with lightweight bottles, which was not the case in the 80s when they had bottle deposit scheme. And by doing that, it means that we don't have to buy new bottles anymore. And the reason we started was simply because we could not buy new bottles. They were not available. And as far as bottle producers are concerned, we were not the first on the food chain. They had all producers that really wanted bottles. So we thought, well, they are everywhere, let's use them. And the one we are not using for our own needs, we are making them available to the trade in the UK for English wine producer, cider producer. And the one that we cannot use, we are crushing them to make sound with it. And so, in fact, all that to show that basically we need innovation. We need innovation in the trade. We need startup, and it's quite exciting actually. Even though there is some scary things happening, there is so much possibility that.
But also another issue, staying with the bottles for the moment, which was raised in a discussion we had the other evening with Robert Joseph, who many of you I'm sure know. Robert may have a question or two on this later, I don't know, but and I'll begin to invite any audience questions. Actually, I'm just looking at our time running, if people want to step in. Is the challenge, because we as a trade have trained effectively the consumers over many years, over many decades, to believe that a heavier bottle, nice big punt kind of equates to nice foil, all the parts perhaps you don't need on a bottle to be more sustainable, as we move towards lightweight bottles. But at the more premium end, that equation between sort of heavier bottle and quality, I think, is actually incredibly strong in some countries more than others. Some notable high-end producers have reduced the weight right down, but I must admit myself that you look at the bottle on the shelf and it's a little bit like, oh, I see, okay, that looks a little bit cheaper, for want of a better word. Can we overcome that, do you think, or is that a very difficult, because that's what I'm interested in, it's like the premium end of bulk, because that's part of the market we need to shift, and do you not think that we also need to shift perception at that end of the market rather than just with the entry-level wines to really advance this kind of in-market bottling and understanding of how the trade can become more sustainable?
Yeah, no, completely. But I kind of think that it will happen naturally, that eventually producers who are using heavyweight bottle will get up one day and think, oh, I'm not going to do it anymore because it's not cool. And I mean, it's not just like that. But if you see, and also it depends on the market. In Argentina, for example, it's going to take a bit longer for consumer to realize that quality is not linked to the weight of the bottle. In Europe, it will take less times, but it needs to happen. But in a way, it's kind of like, it needs to happen, people need to be told, they need to understand, etc., etc., but we shouldn't talk until we are blue in the face about it, because I think that we've got other things to do in the meantime. It doesn't represent the majority of the wine producer. I think most wine is bottled in lighter bottles. And I'm confident that it will happen within the next 5 years. It won't be a problem anymore.
I'm not completely sure. I think that at that premium level, there is still a link, the one that you mentioned, between the weight of the bottle and the level of the bottle, I'll say, or the quality level of the bottle. Maybe it has been exaggerated, right? And we have seen very, very heavy bottles, too heavy ones, just to show that it would be the best wine we could sell. And there has been an exaggeration on that, and that exaggeration will disappear, probably because of environmental concerns. But still, glass will be used, I think, for these. I'm looking at premium level wines, and to a certain extent, the weight will still be pretty high. We will see many more differences in the entry level. And actually, we will not only see lighter bottles, but maybe why not PET bottles or plastic or whatever, and many other changes. Why? Because in that level, probably the cost efficiency, in order to reduce prices, to type of consumer that are very much concerned on the price of the wine they are buying, it will be more important. But I don't really see it in the premium level.
Okay, thank you. No, we've touched on alternative packaging as well, and to a degree during this session we've looked very much at glass, but I think alternative packaging is increasingly going to play a major role looking ahead. Well, I'll be interested to see, ask it as a question to you guys as to how much you believe that. Rafael, you also mentioned the Nordic markets, a very interesting example. For one, you have a system where, or systems where there is essentially a level playing field, and one of the with many aspects of sustainability as businesses. One thing that you'll hear people running those businesses say, that commercially this could be more difficult for me if I put myself forward and I make changes that are initially expensive or initially may alienate some of my consumers when my competitors aren't doing it. Of course, if you have a monopoly, then you have a level playing system, and if a certain amount of wine, you say, right, your wine has to be in bag in box or etc., then that's easier to do. So coming on to my question, it would be about legislation in individual countries or collectively across the EU, etc. What sort of legislation can and will help in terms of the ways in which wine is packaged and distributed? Do you have ideas as to what could help to move this along?
Yes, I do have some ideas, especially because I think that certain things have already happened. I'm remembering now the discussion that was in, I think it was 2009, when the last CMO legislation, the European legislation, it was the first time that a new type of wines was launched and was legally admitted, which is the varietal wines, right? Before we had the PDO wines, the PGI wines, and what we call table wines. Right? But there was something new. These varietal wines were introduced into the legislation and also in international trade codes and so whatever, because, and what was the debate behind that introduction? It was the idea that we should look more at new consumers in new countries and probably get closer to their needs. Right? That's why we started to admit varietal wines, which was something not admitted at all in many producers' countries. So yes, we have already admitted that there are new consumers that approach wine in a different way. Northern countries, North American countries, Asian countries, many others. This has already been admitted. What was the idea in the European legislation and now in many other countries? The idea that we can actually play in both grounds. We can play in our traditional ground with our PDOs, with our traditional premium wines, but also in new types of wine, absolutely open to new trends, to the new fashions, to new consumers, and we can play in both grounds. So there is no need to just have one legislation for one type of wine. This already changed in 2009, and it has been a great development for many European producers.
Fantastic. And Muriel, perhaps from the UK market perspective.
So first, I think it's quite. What I really believe is that the wine industry need to move and be more friends with the drinks industry, and realize how close. I think we are closer to the drink. We should be closer to the drinks industry than maybe we were in the past. And by that, when you think of legislation, you could think of legislation about the drinks industry. For example, I think it would really help in the UK if we had, if the government started implementing law asking for 20% refill and reuse quota in every restaurant or shops. They should be made so it could be with water, beer, wine, etc., etc. And then as an industry, we can really bring change that's going to be so meaningful for the future. And because it's only 20%, it means that, it can happen. We have time to adapt supply chains and to make those moves.
Just, if I may say, because I didn't intervene before when we were talking about reuse of bottles and recycling, but from the point of view of the producing countries, and particularly our experience in Spain, we had to discuss, we discussed this issue a long time ago, and we had to make a decision. You don't really need to choose one or the other, but at the end we had to make the decision between recycling or reuse, right? And we bet for the recycling process. And it has worked very, very well. We have had a very good and very efficient recycling system for more than 30 years now, I think, or 25 years. And we're close to, I think, 70% of all glass bottles to be recycled, which means that we don't really use the same bottle, but we use the origin, the materials of those bottles in order to create new bottles. And the system works pretty well and is very efficient. Could be done in a different way, but it works pretty well. And what we thought at that time is that implementing a system to reuse bottles, actually we had it for Coca-Cola. I remember many years ago, it was pretty difficult for companies, for both companies, for wineries, bottlers, and for glass producers.
Mm-hmm. Very quickly, if we may, Muriel, so we're running on time, and I just wanted to see if there are any questions out there in the audience.
I'm just saying, Rafael, I'll buy you a drink later, and we'll talk about that in more details, because
Fine.
I've got a lot to tell you.
Great. That's probably the conversation everyone wants to hear, but there you go. Would there be, we could keep going, there's so much, but take a question. Yes, please, yeah. Sorry, we don't have a mic for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very enlightening discussion. There was one aspect, however, that I found missing. When we are talking about sustainability, pretty much a lot of people tend to relate sustainability with actual environmental protection. However, we are talking about a balance of three scopes, environmental, social, and economic. Now, Rafael already addressed a bit of the economic aspect of that, but I have found missing the social aspect in all this discussion. And thinking about moving bottling facilities from producing countries to markets, it means displacing jobs from usually lower income regions to higher income regions. What are your take on how to go around that and avoid that to become an unfair trade practice?
I think it's especially interesting against, some of the conclusions of COP27 in terms of, helping lower income countries to, advance them,
It is, so social aspect is very important. And I think, and also what I mentioned earlier with, bulk producer not being paid enough for their bulk or being offered money less than what it costs to make the wines is the first problem that needs to be addressed. And secondly, it is true that jobs are going to be displaced, but it needs to be modeled. There needs to be some modeling done. And also, I do not believe that it's enough a reason not to do it. It's very important to find solution and to see what it means, how it's going to impact communities, and what other jobs can be found. Because if you displace that, it means that other jobs are going to be created. And what's fantastic about the circular economy is that it creates jobs. It's more about flexible scale than big scale. It's more about lightweight ecological industry than big scale industry. That's organic.
But do you agree that we require more data on that before we make the decision to make sure that it doesn't unfairly affect the original communities where that is happening now?
I think it needs to be planned, but it depends also, and it depends also what is the objective. And if the objective is to really change supply chain, at some point it's going to be pain. There is going to be some pain at some point, but the idea is to be creative, and I'm not using that word lightly when I say creative. I think the idea is to be very caring in the approach and talk with people. And I think no one is going to disagree with it if you explain why it's happening and what could be done to mitigate. And what are the gains? Because you are talking about the pain, but there are gains. And I think, there need to be...
I mean, it's a very good question. We didn't touch on social, and having spent a lot of time in South Africa, for example, that's obviously a very big topic, exactly. So I think it's a complex subject we could delve into, but I think at least we've acknowledged that. So thank you, if not answered it. Robert, I know you answered the question. Could we have a microphone over here? Thank you.
I think fascinating conversation, so thank you. Muriel, you're doing something quite unusual in the volumes of wine you're dealing with. So this morning I was talking to a producer who he gets 2 or 3 orders a year from the UK of 2 or 3 pallets. He doesn't know at the beginning of the year how many that's going to be. In terms of bulk, we have minimum shipments. I know we have flexis that we can do, but the question is how much am I going to move from my producer country to my client country? So to me, obviously bulk works very well when you are on a supermarket shelf and you're moving X containers a year, you can work around that. But for a lot of the smaller producers we're talking about, who don't necessarily know what the volume they're going to sell over the year is going to be, turning that into a bulk model seems to me less obvious.
Okay, we're going to have quite brief answers. I'm sorry, Robert, but not because you were long.
So the thing is, 2022 was a very difficult year for everyone. I think it was a bit of a write-off. You kind of didn't really know what was happening, and it was very hard for anyone to commit. But in 2023, I mean, I can send you our forecast, and we've got, it's not because of what we are doing is unusual that we cannot forecast and commit, if you know what I mean. So it's the same.
Okay, thank you. We're a little over time, but I'm sure our panelists will be generous enough with their time if you wish to ask them any questions as we finish. So, just from me, thank you all for coming along and listening. Thank you, Muriel. Thank you, Rafael. It's been really interesting, and hopefully there are some takeaways for you, if nothing else, to continue the conversation around these topics. So, enjoy the show.
Yeah, nothing to add. Thank you very, very much for this interesting conversation. We will have the next discussion at 13:30, means in some minutes. Don't miss it.